I'd like to welcome in Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, Mary Lovely. Mary, thank you so much for your time. We know that the Trump administration is proposing a new, more formal approach to monitoring and adjusting trade between the U.S. and China. I'd like to listen to some of what we heard from the Treasury Secretary.
There's a false narrative out there that if the meetings are delayed, it wouldn't be delayed because the president's demanded that China police the Straits of Hormuz. It would be
because there was a report out to that effect this morning.
That's completely false. So if the meeting for some reason is rescheduled, it would be rescheduled because of logistics. The president wants to remain in D.C. to coordinate the war effort.
All right, so Mary, at this point, do you believe this summit will, in fact, move forward?
I still believe it will move forward. And obviously, I think now we know it's going to be delayed.
So we know tariffs, soybeans, rare earths, AI chips, all key issues on the table here. So assuming that the meeting does, in fact, take place, what do you think we could see come out of a trade deal?
Well, one thing we have learned recently is that they're trying to devise a mechanism for ongoing coordination between the two countries and a way to deal with tensions that come. That's going to be a tough order because many of the things that are on the table influence private commerce between the two countries, both the export controls, the tariffs, whether those tariffs are reinstated, market barriers in China that have reduced our agricultural exports significantly. So we have a lot of questions about how this coordination might happen. This is a new thing that got placed on the table over the weekend.
We know that Strait of Hormuz oil is such a key economic issue right now. What role do you see China playing in the overall situation with Iran?
I think China is just sitting back and seeing how America deals with what China views as a mess of its own making. The oil that's coming out of the Strait of Hormuz is important to China. It's about half of its seaborne oil. But it's only about a third of its overall oil because China gets pipeline oil from Russia and from Central Asia. Looking at China's overall energy mix, it's only about 7% of Chinese energy consumption. China has greatly diversified its energy sources over the last 20 years. It's made massive investments in electrification, and it can rely on renewables, on its own domestic coal, and on nuclear power in ways that make it much less vulnerable to these types of disruptions. So I don't see China rushing in to try to get ships through the strait anytime soon.
And I know you specialize in international economics, but since we have you, Mary, I want to ask you, we know billions of dollars have already been spent by the U.S. on this war in Iran. We know the economy was the #1 issue for Americans before the war. So my question for you, what do you see as some of the long-term impacts of this war for Americans?
Well, of course, to the extent that we see oil price shock in this country, that will affect people's attitudes toward how well President Trump is managing the economy. So one of the longer run implications may be what happens in the midterms and what the political fallout from this will be. Secondly, we'll have to see how President Trump handles the replacement of his so-called Liberation Day tariffs. As we know, the Supreme Court struck down the authority that President Trump thought he had to levy those tariffs. And the administration is moving ahead under a new authority to try to reinstate those tariffs. Those tariffs are inflationary. They certainly have been an irritant with our closest allies and friends. And so the war, which itself is inflationary, could influence the support that the president has in terms of reinstating those tariffs. So clearly the war can influence our trade relations as well as just oil markets and overall foreign policy of the United States.
Economist Mary Lovely, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.